What's up, YouTubers and plant lovers? It's Justin, and today I was going to answer a question. Can you keep a weeping willow as a bonsai tree? Now, this is my Salix babylonica, and I know you know it probably by the common name of the weeping willow. And for good reason. This tree definitely weeps. Now, whenever I say that, I just mean that it has really long, kind of elegant branches that will kind of flow through the wind and move about kind of gracefully. But that is why it's called the weeping willow, because of the way it moves and looks. But anybody that knows me knows that I'm really into bonsaiing. And of course, one of my favorite trees out there is the weeping willow tree. So I wanted to see if you could keep it as a bonsai tree. The short answer is yes, you can keep a weeping willow as a bonsai tree. But the long, more in-depth, kind of complicated answer is you can, but it is very complicated. And I wanted to go into some of the reasons why keeping a willow tree is kind of a complicated bonsai tree specimen to have. Everybody knows that it has these long, graceful, arcing fronds and stems and leaves, and they're just beautiful plants, beautiful trees out there in nature. But to keep one as a bonsai specimen requires a great deal of knowledge and a great deal of time and a great deal of work and energy, and it's all for good reason, just because these plants are rather huge. I believe that they can get to about 50 feet tall, about 50 feet wide, just about as tall as they are wide, but they do take up considerable space. And everybody knows about bonsai that's just trying to keep a tree in a smaller portion size in a pot, so that you can kind of keep them around your yard or your house or whatever have you. But just know that these are trees. These are plants that need to be outside all the time. Morning, noon, night, summer, spring, fall, winter. These plants need to be outdoors. They do not need to be in your home because they do not get near enough light in your home. Even if you have it in a south-facing window or a Florida room or anything of that nature, your plant is still not getting the right amount of sunlight that it needs or that it would if it were outdoors. Coincidentally, these trees need at least 6 hours of direct sunlight a day. Now, if you live in an area that is more prone to direct sunlight, and you're more towards the south where the temperatures are always in the triple digits or close to it, you may want to give your weeping willow some shade, especially towards the hotter part of the day, anytime around noon and thereafter. Some morning sunlight is sufficient, but like I said, I keep mine in direct sunlight all day and he's happy with that. But just know these plants need full direct sunlight in order to thrive and be happy and be full and get that desired look that you want from a willow tree. Another thing that you need to realize about these trees is that they are thirsty plants. Thirsty bitches, these willow trees. In nature, they are typically found growing alongside ponds, lakes, rivers, streams, any kind of larger bodies of water that they can have access to put their roots down and siphon water off is where you'll find them. In my old neighborhood, we had this massive one that was next to a creek. And if you went down there, you could kind of see where the roots kind of trickle down in there to siphon off some of that water from the creek bed. So these plants, by nature and design, are prone to drinking a lot of water. A lot of water indeed. So make sure that if you do have one of these plants, that you are watering it maybe even several times a day. If not, your plant will die off rather quickly. So make sure that you're either using a drip irrigation system if you have one that's not established yet, or you're going out there checking on it regularly and making sure that the soil is at least kept moist, because these plants love their water. Now, you do have to be careful with that because you can get these plants to actually develop root rot not as quickly as other plants. They do like their water, but they don't want to be sitting in wet, soggy, saturated soils all day. So you do want to make sure that your plant does have access to water, but you don't want to drown them out either. So you don't want to put like a terracotta pot down in like a bucket of water to let them suck up all that water or anything like that. But just kind of keep your watering pail close by and check on your plant once or twice a day and make sure that the soil isn't completely dry, but it does have some saturation and some moisture to it, and your weeping willow tree will be happy with that. But just remember, these guys are very thirsty trees and need a decent amount of water. More than your average bonsai or other trees need. These plants do like their water, so don't forget that. If you remember anything from this video, just remember that weeping willow trees love water. Another thing I wanted to talk about with these guys is their fast growth rate. These trees are no bristlecone pines. These guys can put on about a foot of growth in a month, if not faster. So I mean, they can actually top out fairly quickly, and I think at maturity they're around 5 or 6, maybe 8, that they're considered basically fully matured plants. So it doesn't take long for them to mature. I think he is about 4 years old. He might be approaching 5 this year, but you can tell that I got him off eBay, and when I got him, he was about a year old, just a little bitty old stick that I stuck in a pot, and was really surprised to find out that this tree would actually put on this much mass in the pot that I have him in, and coincidentally, he is in a terracotta pot. So just don't come for me in the comment sections when you see, because in a little bit I will be going ahead and repotting him to put him in a larger pot to accommodate this massive growth size that this tree's put on in just the last 2 years alone. But just remember, these trees are fast growing trees, so they really want to send up all their stems quite tall before they will start arcing down and forming that familiar look that we desire with these weeping willows. But they want to get to that top out height of around 40-50 feet or so before they do start to arc down on their fronds and everything. And as you can tell, mine is not at that height yet, and it's starting to cascade down a little bit. But like I said, they're going to shoot up very tall before they do start to arc down and form that familiar look that we desire with weeping willows. So just make sure that you have plenty of room for your tree, because he's going to get very tall and he will eventually start to widen out some as well. Another thing I wanted to mention is with wiring. A lot of people say that you probably do have to wire these guys pretty well just to get them to actually start to arc down and have these weeping cascading fronds that you want. But just remember, the weeping willow has a really thin bark on it. So I'm not going to wire my tree. I'm going to let him grow all natural, just because the bark that they form is very thin. And it's very easy to leave wiring on for maybe even a couple of weeks and come back and find that it's cut into the bark and starting to actually cause damage to your plant and your stems and your leaves. So just if you do wire yours, make sure that you just keep it fairly tight, but not too tight. You got to find that happy median, because these wires will cut into them rather quickly and cause damage, more harm than good, with your willow tree. And just so you know, cats love them too. I think that's just because of the way it moves. It's really kind of draws the attention of my cats to it. So just be careful, because I have him outdoors, and we do have a lot of outdoor cats in my neighborhood, so you want to put it someplace that it's not going to be frequented by many cats, because they will come in, and some of my older cats like to sharpen their claws on my bonsai trees, but you can get these little protective shields that will go around them to actually protect your trees, to make sure that nobody's coming in and sharpening either their horns or their claws on your bonsai trees and actually kill them. So just be careful, because as I mentioned before, they do have that really thin bark that doesn't take much to damage it at all. And they do draw a lot of attention from elk, rabbit, deer that come in, and they like to actually munch on the leaves and twigs. And then they do have a lot of problems with some pests too. I think gypsy moths, scale, borers, and lace bugs all are kind of drawn to weeping willows. So just make sure that you're keeping an eye out for pests on your tree too. Now I'm going to be repotting mine, and as I brought it indoors to shoot this video, I will take it outdoors to repot. I did notice that he had a lot of problems with roly-polies in the pot and underneath the pot as well. And that just comes from the natural environment. If roly-polies aren't finding enough to eat, they're mainly drawn to decomposing plant material, roots, leaves, stems, anything of that nature that's kind of breaking down. They are drawn to actually eat and digest all that up. But if they can't find enough decomposing material, they will actually start to eat on your plants and eat the roots and the stems and leaves, just to kind of supplement for more nutrition for them as well. So if you do see roly-polies in there, just make sure that you kind of clear them away as best you can, because they will. Now, one other thing I wanted to tell you, I did learn with these trees, you do want to kind of keep them up a little bit, because these leaves will kind of shoot straight up and then begin to start cascading down, and then they'll start rubbing on the grass and the ground just because they are so far down. So you may need to setting up a little bit to make sure that their leaves aren't kind of filtering through the dirt and wiping things away and getting all dirty and having problems. And then whenever I put him in his new pot, I'm probably going to elevate him just a little bit to make sure that there isn't a bunch of problems, so that whenever I put him in his new spot, he'll be up considerably and won't have to worry about these leaves coming into contact with a lot of dirt and a lot of mud and then just kind of filtering out all through that. All right, now the only other thing that I wanted to talk about with these guys is their soil and their nutrient compatibility with that. Typically they can function really well in all kinds of soil qualities, and you'll find that they can be native to just about anywhere in the United States, but typically they prefer acidic soil, anywhere from around like 4.5 on up to a little bit of alkaline soil on an 8.0, but make sure that they do have a little bit of acidity in their soil, because they do like a little bit of acidity in the soil. I keep mine at around 6.5, and you can get soil samples and send it off to your local extensions office if you wanted to test the acidity of your soil, or you could buy some stuff at Lowe's and Home Depot to test that yourself. But I know that the neighborhood that I live in has pretty neutral soil, so I add a little bit of acidity booster to my soil to actually help him out. And I haven't given him some recently, especially this year, and I can tell that he's not as full as he usually is, and he's got some dead and dying branches here that I'm going to have to prune back here in a little bit. But typically with the soil, like I said, you want to watch out for the acidity, and then you want it to have a nice consistency with organic material, something that it can kind of break down over time, and then be able to release the excess water that it so needs relatively freely. So typically, it's not the best idea to put them in a terracotta pot, but if you're watering them religiously and making sure that their watering needs are being met, then a terracotta pot may be best for you. But if not, I'm going to put them in a new ceramic pot that has been sealed to actually help them out in the wintertime, because I do go ahead and move them from being outdoors into my shed to protect them from the cold, extreme kind of winters. Here in Kentucky, we usually get mild winters, but with the weeping willows, the root systems are fairly shallow. So if they're exposed to extreme temperature fluctuations and the cold and frost, then they probably will die. So make sure that you do have yours in a sealed pot, and if you don't, you actually put yours indoors to keep it protected from the cold and harsh rains and wind that you may receive, especially if you're up north. But you don't want to put it in an environment that it is heated indoors, because then your tree won't be able to go dormant and you'll have to keep watering it a whole lot. But they do need to go through a cold winter experience to actually make sure that they're going to be taken care of the right way. So you want them to be protected from the harsh winds and the cold extremes, but you don't want them to be fully protected. You just want to kind of encase them a little bit and protect them. And then coincidentally, you can put some mulch over top of it to help keep the roots that are at the shallow end insulated fairly well too. But the new pot that I'm going to put in is sealed, so it will actually help a lot more with the cold extremes that we receive here. And I will go ahead and put in some mulch on top to actually help those shallow roots, as I was saying. Now, it is a bonsai tree, and I'm keeping it as a bonsai tree. So I've got some Bonsai Jack 1 gallon soil media. It's actually soil-less. It's the Akadama stuff from like Japan that they use for their bonsai soils. And it's got a lot of charcoal, clay, bits, and that Akadama soil that is very popular for bonsai trees. And I know wanted to show you, along with the soil, what else I was going to be using and these tools that I actually have laid out in front of me. And I guess you could say they're in order from least important to most important. So I have my back scratcher right here. It is what I use for my root rake. I actually have another root rake that I use, but I'm going to be using this one today. It's got these rounded edges that aren't as harsh as the other one is because it's more blunt and would actually kind of rip through it. And like I said, these roots are really shallow and very intricate and very delicate, so I don't want to rip them apart very easily. I want to actually kind of rake all that out and separate them and make sure that they're not going to be destroyed as I'm doing that. Next I have my chopstick, and this is a very, very, very important tool, especially whenever pruning and repotting, because it will actually help you get in there and eliminate any kind of airspace as you're tamping it all down and getting all that in around the roots and making sure it fills in properly. This is a very, very, very popular tool for that, and can actually help you kind of separate the roots out better, whatever you couldn't get with your root rake too. Next I have my very sharp pruning shears by Fiskars. I love these guys. These are very durable, very sharp, and I keep them that way, but I do have these for this guy because he's got some thin branches, and I will do a lot of pruning with the roots and with the stems as well. Now these trees are somewhat hardy to pruning, so you want to prune them religiously just because they grow so much. And with the weeping willows, you can prune about 1/3 of the branch structure without actually causing harm to the plant. But I'm going to be pruning some of the roots as well, and just a little bit on top. So if you're going to be doing both, you don't want to do too much. I'm probably going to do maybe about 1/4 of the roots, and probably considerably less than 1/3 of the stems as well. So if you do too much, you will actually cause a lot of harm and transplant shock to your tree. So you just want to take a little bit off the bottom and take a little bit off the top as well, and I'll be removing any kind of branches that are dead or branches that are crossing, and some of them that are considerably longer that need to be pruned back as well too. Next I have my pruning shear sharpener. Always want to make sure that your pruning shears are very sharp. You don't want to be cutting on something that is going to split the wood and crack it and leave it damaged and have a bunch of holes in it, because as you know, disease and pest and all kinds of other problems will be able to enter your plant wherever you cut on it. So if you do have any kind of fungicide after you cut on it, I will go ahead and kind of spray the areas that I cut on to make sure that I won't have any problems with like powdery mildew or any kind of other fungus that may come in there and try to wreak havoc on my plant. So you make sure that you always sharpen and sterilize your pruning shears. And that is why I have my 99.9% isopropyl alcohol in here too, because I always sanitize all my pruning shears and all my pruning equipment before I go on and start cutting on a new plant to eliminate any problems with disease or anything of that nature.
Alright, so for today I figured you could go ahead and watch me do my repotting as I did my outro as well. I didn't have too much to say during the repotting. Most of it you already know if you've been familiar with my channel for quite some time now. And as always, I wanted to give a special shout out to my top tier tree patrons like Thuyen. Thank you. I also want to give another shout out to my other patrons like David and Heather. If you are interested in supporting my channel through Patreon, check the link in the description box. As always, supporting my channel goes to keeping the lights on, the LEDs, the plants watered, the fertilizers, new pots, and all that. It's expensive being a plant dad. And as always, this has been Justin reminding you that if you can, go out and plant a tree. Let's reforest the world. And while you're at it, don't forget to leave me a comment and let me know if you've ever tried to keep a willow tree as a bonsai. I believe there's about 400 different species out there, so let me know which ones you've had success or failures with. And while you're at it, don't forget to hit the subscribe button or the bell next to it. That way you'll know anytime that I've uploaded a new video. Alright guys, take it easy and don't forget, always plant prudently. Thank you, YouTube.